First Fenway rundown of the week, January 7th. It's a Tuesday. I'm Chris Cotillo here with Sean McAdam. It is absolutely freezing outside, which means that Red Sox fans are getting antsy on the internet. What else is new, Sean? Not much in the way of hard news, but it does feel like as we get past the holidays here, as we get back to the first normal week in a while, it feels like the hot stove's picking up a little bit. It feels like there's more in the way of rumors. It feels like the dam here might break in the next few days, and you could see some action throughout the league. And I would anticipate that that's going to be the case as we get to 5 weeks from right now, pitchers and catchers reporting.
Yeah, you can see spring training on the horizon. We're into the new year, as you said, really the first full week of January. Offices that were closed down are now open. Everyone's back to work. And you would think that what's left out there, this is not like past years for the most part, where you had some of the biggest free agents still unsigned. There are
a few.
Yeah, there are a couple, and it just so happens that the Red Sox are linked to a few of them, including Tanner Scott, who is unquestionably the best reliever still on the market, and, of course, Alex Bregman. But this is not, a year ago where three or four of the biggest free agents, guys like Cody Bellinger and
Snell and Montgomery and Chapman
a couple of the
year.
big pitchers were still sitting out there and didn't sign until well into spring training. But there are some players of note still there, and a couple of whom, as I said, have been linked to the Red Sox. So we'll see where that goes.
And, there are a ton of rumors flying, as I said. And I think you get to a point, people are not distracted by the holidays. It's also like 4 degrees with wind chill out today. And you can just see kind of the angst on Twitter and social media and just the kind of these rumors blow up and everybody's on edge. And we'll talk about kind of the overall vibe question I was asked on Play Tessie the other night that I want to get to with you. But let's go through different areas of the roster, different updates, different things we've written about and reported in the last few days. I do want to start with Nolan Arenado because that was a big headline from Sunday night. You and I were able to confirm that the Red Sox are a preferred destination, if not the preferred destination for Nolan Arenado. He has made it clear to the Cardinals. His camp has made it clear to the Red Sox that he would welcome a deal here. That's no small thing because he did turn down and block that deal to the Astros. He's not a guy that's just going to waive the no trade clause for anywhere. We've seen that already. He wants to come to Boston. Ultimately, it's not his call. It's up to the Cardinals and the Red Sox to work out a deal. There's a lot of moving parts. We'll get to Triston Casas. Where do you stand with everything related to Nolan Arenado right now? And how important do you think is that factor that we wrote about that he is willing to come here?
Well, I think it's significant, as you said, because it's a hurdle that has to be cleared right at the beginning of the process. The Cardinals did a lot of legwork, had a deal in place with the Astros, as you referenced, and kind of when they were set to pull the trigger, Arenado stuck his hand up and said, hell no, I won't go, and the deal got killed. And so the fact that not only is he willing to come here, but actually seems to be suggesting that he would prefer to come here. He understands that the Cardinals are trying to move on from him, largely for salary reasons, to get rid of $64 million or so over the next 3 seasons. That's a significant amount of money. The Cardinals are scaling back a little bit, rebuilding, if you will. And the fact that Arenado is pointing to Boston and saying, that's a place I'd want to go, as I said, clears an early hurdle in the process, but there's a long way to go here. How does he then fit into the Red Sox situation? Obviously, he'd be coming here to play third base, and that means Rafael Devers would not. And, following that equation out, it would mean likely the trading of Triston Casas. And here's where it gets a little tricky for me, because while I think Arenado is the better move to make over Bregman, because I don't think it's a good idea to get into a 6 or even a 7-year commitment to a guy who is already trending downhill. Doesn't mean Bregman can't contribute and be a pretty good player for the next few years. But if you're bringing him in for 6 or 7 years at close to or over $30 million, That's a mega commitment, and I don't think it's a good one. So I think 3 years of Arenado is preferable to 6 or 7 with Bregman. Now, here's where it gets sticky. You can take Bregman and not have to lose Casas. And meanwhile, if you bring Arenado in, it essentially forces you, as part of the first half of a two-pronged move, to turn around and move Casas for pitching or whatever else they're valuing at this point, likely young starting pitching. And I don't like the idea of giving up on Triston Casas at this point in his career. I think he's got a huge ceiling. I think he's got 35 to 40 home run potential. He's got the ability to work at bats. He can get on base. There's a lot to like there. So I'm torn as to which of these two moves makes more sense. On the front end, Arenado does. On the back end, losing Casas, to me, mitigates a lot against that deal.
Yeah, well, first of all, people think you don't like Casas as a player because you'd rather trade him than Duran from our earlier offseason conversation. But clearly, you are putting that theory to bed with that take right
Yeah,
there.
no, I have nothing against Casas, and I think he's an interesting guy to cover from kind of a personal standpoint. You're never quite sure what he's going to say. That makes things interesting, but purely from a baseball standpoint, I think they'd be, look, finding power in the game is a tough thing to do. And they have a guy who has the potential for tons of it. And I'm not sure that how they're presently constituted. And I realize that they don't have that 22-year-old starter in their system who could, be a number one or number two in a year or two. And the opportunity to get somebody who fits that profile makes a lot of sense. You should always be thinking about stockpiling starting pitching options, especially elite ones that you would control for a full 5 or 6 years. But I think giving up Casas is too big a price to pay there. So the combination of the salary obligations that come with Bregman, and the need to have the domino fall and trade Casas elsewhere, to me, brings down both options for them, and neither one is perfect.
Yeah, I think a couple things here. Number one, there is a way where you can have all three of them on the roster if you just DH one of them full time. Or, you obviously want Arenado at third every day. Maybe you have Devers as your full time DH. Do you want to do that at this point in his career? I mean, I would rather that idea than the trading Casas and moving him to first. I think, and I think maybe Harold Reynolds was talking about this on MLB Network yesterday, or maybe the Foul Territory guys I've watched a lot. We're talking about how we just say, oh, let's move a guy to first base. It's not as easy as that sentence suggests. Sometimes it doesn't work. Devers has literally never played the position. It's not as easy as it, seems on paper. That's why I've said, and I've used this line 100 times since October, this idea, all the moving parts, it looks okay maybe on paper to some, but it's trying to do too much. It's, filling one hole to create another. It's that whole, process of, if A, then B, then C, then D, when there were cleaner fits. I won't say the T word, Teoscar, but you know how I feel about that. I think there, is a way maybe where Devers is the DH, Arenado's the third baseman, and Casas is the first baseman. You have to cut bait with Yoshida at that point.
Here's the problem with that. And from a baseball standpoint, I don't disagree. I don't have an issue with Devers being made the full-time DH. He no doubt would.
Right.
But, and everyone's like, oh, you can't pay a DH $30 million. So you can pay a third baseman who's giving you very little defensively that money. What difference does it make? Here's the issue. That scenario is about a $40 million a year commitment for each of the next few years, because you're taking in, for next year, you'd be taking on $27 million for Arenado and giving up, 19 and change for Yoshida. And let's make clear, you're either going to have to DFA this guy or take back a huge amount of money to get someone to take him off your hands. So you're talking about, an investment of $40 million there, the 27 coming in on Arenado and whatever else you can salvage by getting rid of either by DFA or in a take salary back trade whatever's left for Yoshida for the next 3 years. What evidence is there that this team is willing to make that kind of commitment?
Yeah, and the other thing, people just see kind of the Chaim Bloom works for the Cardinals. He signed Yoshida, and they make that jump. I wouldn't be so quick to do that because the Cardinals don't want to add money. So why would they take a bad contract on
Right.
when they're trying
This
to get
is
rid of
not,
one?
we'll trade your bad contract for ours. This is a team trying to unload a 3-year commitment on a player who's in decline in his 30s. Doesn't mean he still can't play or contribute, but they want that money off their books. They're not about to take bad money off to trade it. That gets them nowhere. So there may be a taker for Yoshida, but it's not the Cardinals, and it's going to cost a lot of money to get somebody to take him.
On Casas, I think there have been few ideas and rumors that have been more universally hated by Red Sox fans than the idea of trading this guy. There is the small faction of he paints his nails, so trade him, losers. But outside of that, there are, I think, I think there's a long, long list of people that don't think that this would be a good move for the organization. You and I among them. And the reality is, though, that they are entertaining this seriously. This has been the case since the beginning of the offseason. Craig Breslow can deny it. He can go with the semantics of not shopping. We've heard from people around the game who have talked to the Red Sox, like, not just that, like, he's available if you ask, but some people believe they want to move him and they want to do this, dating back to the original Rosenthal story where this first came out about, pursuing Adames or Bregman. Why they are so intrigued by the idea of trading Casas, I think eludes both of us. The reality is that, it's very much on the table and something they're very open to. And I think going back to Breslow's comments, and we talked about this on the last pod, like, we've called it disingenuous to say they're not shopping him. And there's been a lot of arguments out there about, the meaning of shopping versus available. Just, the TLDR version is, if you come up with an offer, the Red Sox will be willing to move him.
No question.
And fans just because they hate that, they don't think it's true for some reason. I hate that whole, well, I don't like it, so it can't be true thing. When yesterday the Tanner Scott frontrunner thing, that's probably not true, but it was a positive development, so everybody just believed it and just immediately took it as gospel. I think that the Casas thing, I still wouldn't do it, but there's just a huge amount of evidence right now that tells us that they are open, if not wanting, to move this guy for whatever reason.
Yeah, and it would be toward landing that potential future number one guy, a guy maybe even less developed and less experienced than Crochet. You can look around and see some former first-round picks who are out there that might fit that profile, but they clearly understand from a pitching inventory standpoint that while they have additional depth at AAA in guys like Fitz and Criswell and Dobbins and some others, that they don't have a guy who could in a year or so be a number one or number two here. You're waiting for Perales to recover from Tommy John. And after that, there's a big fall off in terms of high-end starting pitching prospects. They would like to change that, and they see Casas as a way to get them there.
Two guys,
and if I may, to improve the infield defense but as you note correctly, swapping out Casas for Devers at first does nothing to help them at first base. And if anything, because of the lack of experience that you cited, it may be a step back. Casas is no one's idea of a gold glove first baseman, but he at least has the experience of having played there most of his career. Devers does not. So, yeah, you'd get Arenado as an upgrade at third. Clearly, even as he gets older, he's one of the best fielding third basemen in the game. I think you'd have to go. You'd have to go back to, maybe Scott Rowland, or even back to Brooks Robinson and Mike Schmidt in that era to get a third baseman who is that good at the position. even in his early to mid 30s, he still is an upgrade over Devers, but you're not upgrading at all at first base. So that's another hole in that argument.
Yeah, and there's a lot to, there's a lot of things that need to, fall into place. If I'm trading Triston Casas, there's like two guys that I would really target. I don't think either of them are, available or you're going to get them for him. Joe Ryan in Minnesota, Jared Jones in Pittsburgh. Those are like the type of guys you're talking about. To me, like, those guys are always good to chase, but you do have Crochet who you're hoping to extend, and you do have, now the rotation depth. So, again, as I've said since October, feels like a little too much when it comes to, everything that would have to go into this. Bregman, a cleaner fit, but still doesn't seem like there are aggressors there. If he were to go to second base, we'll see where this goes. They're definitely talking about all these possibilities, but it just seems to me like, there's serious hurdles to all of them.
Yeah, and we should also bring up the report this morning from, speaking of first base, of Bob Nightingale, where he writes that there is widespread belief in the industry that Vladdy Guerrero's junior top choice for free agency, should he get there, and it certainly looks like he's going to, would be to come to Boston, and countered that by saying that that may have impacted the Red Sox slow playing Bregman and dragging their feet on him. Look, it may well be that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would prefer to come to Boston. It would obviously be a great fit for him as a hitting environment. He's played here a lot because he's in the division. He understands.
Pretty tight with Devers, I think, too.
Right. Understands through his dad the lineage of Dominican superstar players here that have come through, be it Pedro, Ortiz, Manny, now Devers. It would be a perfect fit in a lot of ways, but the notion that the Red Sox are holding off on improving for next year and passing up options because they're waiting for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to land in their lap next year at a contract that's going to probably get to $500 million. He's not going to rival Soto, but it would not surprise many people if he were somewhere between 400 and 500 million next year on the open market. He is, like Soto, going to be relatively young as a free agent because he made his major league debut so soon, and that might make it a little easier to sell that kind of deal here. We've seen the Red Sox be willing to be in on players who become free agents younger and don't age out quite as quickly. We saw it with Yamamoto. We saw it with re-signing Devers, and we saw it with their willingness to go to $700 million on Soto. But this whole, no, we're good, we're getting Vladdy next year, right, cannot be an operating principle this winter.
Yeah, especially because, a lot of times, the extension talks accelerate fast, and the Blue Jays give him a number that he can't say no to in 3 weeks in spring training at the trade deadline. Like, there's not a lot of evidence to suggest that that will be the case, but if they feel the pressure of a division rival potentially landing him, they have all the money in the world. We've seen they made huge offers to Ohtani and Soto and those guys. They might lock up their own guy, and then once you're in a bidding war with other teams, right? Like,
well,
Soto, so like, look no further than the Soto thing or other, bidding wars that have happened. Maybe the Yankees get in on Vladdy. Maybe
absolutely.
The Mets get in
they
on
have
Vladdy,
a patchwork,
right? Like,
first baseman with Paul Goldschmidt on a 1-year deal. They're going to be in the market for a first baseman. The Mets, if they don't re-sign Pete Alonso, might be eager to bring in somebody like Guerrero. So this notion that the Red Sox are a lock ignores two huge factors. One, Guerrero's going to have a ton of suitors. And two, the Red Sox, in case you haven't noticed, have not exactly been flinging $500 million contracts around and signing players. Yeah, they've been in on bidding for some big ones and been willing to go pretty far if the actuarial tables line up for them. But they could hardly be thinking that this is some kind of mortal lock and all we have to do is bide our time.
Right. There's a few people saying, why don't they just trade for him right now? I don't think Toronto's probably going to move him for to a division rival at this moment. And also, the Red Sox probably shouldn't give up Roman Anthony if they're so convinced they can sign this guy for money and just money in a year. Well, that'll obviously be a topic we talk about for the next 365 days plus, most likely. So we'll leave it there. Let's get to the bullpen relievers. That has been the focus of my day and kind of most of the last 24 hours. We saw a big piece of the Red Sox bullpen. We'll start here. Leave last night. Chris Martin goes to the Rangers, 1 year, $5.5 million. He wanted to be close to home. He told our Chris Smith he was 95% sure this would be his last year. He's pitched in the majors for a decade. A lot of young kids. He's, I think, born and raised in Arlington. We saw him at the winter meetings in Dallas where he was meeting with teams. I think for him, if the Rangers were going to offer him anything, he was going to take it. He took less money than the Red Sox offered. But, we give them a lot of. Jim told us not to swear as much on the pod. So crap, our boss, Jim Pigdatello, crap about bad free agent deals and not spending. Heimblum, 2 winters ago, went very aggressive on the bullpen and signed Martin and Jansen within a week to 2-year deals. The Martin deal, you look at it, a 2.16 ERA over 100 appearances, a leader in the bullpen and a guy that, teammates liked. I think that's as good of a free agent deal as you look back at it and close the book now as you could possibly envision. Also, I think, the notion of the Red Sox making a stronger offer than Texas did here. Can't read into it too much, but does just confirm what we already knew, and we'll get to this, that they are in hard on these kind of back-end veterans.
Yeah, look, I think bringing back Chris Martin would have been a good move, particularly if it was, let's say it was $7 million or 6.5, whatever I don't think that he took a huge haircut to stay home, but clearly the Red Sox, as reported by WEEI's Rob Bradford, had outbid the Rangers, and he took the closer to home option. That's understandable. It was only 2 years ago that the Rangers won the World Series, a big step back last year. Guys underperformed, injuries. They could well be back in the hunt. That division is now up for grabs. The Astros are going backwards. They've lost Bregman. That's a wide open division. He has a chance not only to stay home, but to go out with a winner. So, and I think he would have been a decent addition or a return to bring him back. But I think really the Red Sox should be aiming a little higher than Martin, somebody who has closer experience and or potential. And I know Martin served in that role occasionally over his career, including a short time here with Jansen wasn't available. But I think they could get, I still think that they should be aiming higher to get one more really high quality arm at the back. To me, there's a lot of uncertainty about turning over your closer's duties to either a guy who's pitched about 5 innings in the last 2.5 years, that would be Liam Hendricks, and Justin Slayton, who's got 50 or so major league games in his career, to all of a sudden be entrusted with the 9th inning. So the fact that they are at least in somewhat on Tanner Scott, to me, is a good sign. Hoffman, some of the other options. I like Kirby Yates, and I wonder whether bringing Martin back at all shuts the door for him there in Texas. I know Yates probably has a market bigger than that, but that would be another short-term deal without a lot of exposure for them that I think would be good to make.
Yeah, I wrote this morning, look at Tanner Scott and a dozen other relief options that could fit. And we talked about this on last week's pod, but it just still rings true. Martin going off the board, kind of a case all by itself, because we know he wanted to go to Texas. He got the deal done, signed, sealed, delivered. But if you look at, the relief market and all the guys that are still available, there are a ton. We'll get to some of those names. We all saw the report about the Red Sox being the clear front runners for Tanner Scott. As I wrote today, I think that's probably a bit premature. I could see them, going all in on him, even at $20 million a year. It's a worthwhile investment. I add that as their big free agent signing at the beginning of the winter. I did say last time on the pod that having Chapman and having Wilson, having Penrod and Bernardino and all these lefties on the roster, maybe their big relief addition is a righty. Scott's the type of guy that can get, lefties and righties out. So if you want to go and you want to be super elite, he does make sense. I will say, from everything we're hearing, you expect the biggest market teams in on this guy. The Mets have apparently met with him. The Dodgers have been involved as well. All the way down the line, there's big market teams. The bidding could get out of hand. And so to call the Red Sox a clear front runner, I think, it's going to come down to the best offer in a really good market for him. You look down the list, they've touched base on Hoffman, who's had a good couple years. I agree with you on Yates. My line today, StatCast page, redder than Tom Coughlin's cheeks during a playoff game, which is absolutely the case. He was elite last year. You could probably get him on a 2-year deal. To me, 2 years for a reliever, always more palatable than 4. They've checked in on Carlos Estevez. David Robertson's a guy that's been linked to them about every year for his entire career.
He lives in Rhode Island, Chris,
he does
so
live
it
in Rhode
makes
Island.
sense that he'd want
You
to
used
sign
to
here.
as well. They've talked to A.J. Minter, who has been a really good lefty for the Braves, might not be available for opening day. They've talked to Tommy Kahnle and Andrew Kittredge. I think one guy that really stands out, Jose Leclerc, another guy who might not go back to Texas now that Martin's there. Crazy whiff rate, crazy strikeout percentages. Run prevention wasn't there last year, but a guy that would seem to really be what Alex Cora wants in his bullpen going down the list.
And a guy who's handled the 9th inning. He was
Right.
a closer there for a while, and has the stuff and the swing and miss ability to fill that role.
So we have Sewald and Junis and Finnegan, Chafin and Poche on this list as well. So that's those 5. But between Kahnle, Kittredge, Leclerc, Minter, that's 4. Robertson, Estevez, Yates, Hoffman, and Scott, that's 9. The Red Sox, I would bet a lot of money that the Red Sox land one of those 9. And that's
the problem being that there's a disparity between some of those names and the guys at the top.
But that'll reflect in the contract as well.
Well, exactly. So we'll see. I think a lot of guys, as you had hinted, are waiting for Scott to sign because that'll set the bar. He's obviously going to be the guy who ends up with the top contract among those 8 or 9 really elite relievers. Once Tanner Scott is off the board, you're going to see a real domino-like effect of movement, and everyone else is going to fall in line. That could happen in the next 10 days or so. We've been told that Scott is looking for about $20 million annually. Whether the Red Sox have the stomach for that or the budget for it, we're about to find out. But once he's gone, everyone else will kind of fall in line there and get less than that, at least on an AAV standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, to do one of these, especially that one, or Hoffman, or Yates for 2 years, and to add an Arenado or a Bregman, you have to go past that CBT. You get 26 or 27 million. They've said they're willing to do that. I mean, I guess you could go out and get Randall Grichuk and Tanner Scott and stay under. But if you want to go get elite in both categories that you need, you have to go over. And we'll see if they do that as we get toward spring training. This will be a busy week for us and Red Sox fans, as the inaugural Fenway Fest, which we talked about last time, is on Saturday. We will have one more podcast before then. We haven't had a guest in a little bit here, so the plan is to try to land one maybe Friday. Won't tease the name yet, but we're talking to somebody who recently signed with the Red Sox about coming on, so hopefully we'll be able to land that then. For now, this is the Fenway Rundown. Thanks for listening.